If you're just joining us, stop right here. You need to watch episode 1 first, or nothing that happens next will hit the way it should. The link is right there in the description. Go watch how Mitchell and Jean's story began, how a folded note changed everything, and how we got to this heart-stopping moment. For those of you who've been with us since that dizzy spell in the executive corridor, welcome back. You've been waiting for this. You've been wondering if Mitchell would find her in time. If love could really be worth more than revenge. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, and share this with someone who believes love is worth the risk. Because what happens in the next few minutes will make you understand why some stories aren't just entertainment. They're reminders of what it means to choose someone over everything else. Jean Morrison is in danger. Mitchell Hayes is about to make an impossible choice, and nothing will ever be the same. Now, let's find out if a man can really give up everything for the woman he loves. Let's go back to that parking garage. On stage, Mitchell's hands were shaking as he looked down at the note that had been slipped into his folder. The handwriting was crude, block letters written by someone who wanted to hide their identity. "We have her. Sign the papers and keep your mouth shut if you want to see the Morrison girl alive." No police, no heroic acts, just sign. Mitchell's vision tunneled, his ears rang. The entire auditorium seemed to fade away until there was only that note, those words, that threat. They had Jean. His eyes shot to the back corner where she'd been standing moments ago. Empty. She was gone. "Mitchell?" Donovan's voice carried false concern. "Is everything all right?" Mitchell's head snapped toward Garrett, and he saw it immediately. The slight smirk his half-brother couldn't quite hide, the satisfaction in his eyes. Garrett had done this, had taken Jean, had threatened her to leverage Mitchell's silence. For one crystalline moment, Mitchell stood at a crossroads. He could expose them right now. He had the evidence in his briefcase, had SEC investigators in this very room, had everything he needed to bring down Donovan and Garrett's entire scheme. But they had Jean and Mitchell, who'd spent 3 months planning this moment, who'd documented every detail of the fraud, who'd been preparing to execute the perfect corporate takedown, made his choice in less than a heartbeat. He closed the folder with the note inside. "Everything's fine," Mitchell said, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through his veins. "Just reviewing some final details. Gentlemen, shall we proceed with the signing?" Donovan's smile widened. Garrett relaxed visibly. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what Mitchell Hayes was willing to do for the woman who'd slipped a warning into his hand that morning. Mitchell picked up the gold pen, his hand steady despite the terror coursing through his veins. He needed them to believe they'd won, needed them to think he was broken, compliant, and defeated so they wouldn't hurt Jane. "Where do I sign?" His voice came out flat, emotionless. Donovan's smile turned triumphant. "Page 47, Mr. Hayes, right at the bottom." Mitchell flipped through the documents with mechanical precision, found the signature line, and signed Mitchell A. Hayes in his distinctive script. The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Every stroke of ink was a second John remained in danger. "Excellent choice," Garrett said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "You're doing the right thing, brother." Mitchell's jaw tightened at the word brother, but he said nothing. He closed the folder, set down the pen, and stood. "If you'll excuse me," Mitchell said, his voice carrying just enough strain to sound believable. "I need a moment." "Mitchell, we should announce—" Donovan started. 5 minutes. Mitchell's tone left no room for argument. He walked off the stage, ignoring the confused murmurs from the audience, ignoring Garrett's satisfied smirk. Dominic met him in the wings, his face grim. "Boss, we tracked her. Parking garage, level B3. But Mitchell, I know." Mitchell was already moving, his long strides eating up the distance to the service elevator. "How many?" 2 men, armed. "But boss, there's something else. Tell me on the way." They took the service elevator down, Dominic briefing him rapidly. Jean's phone is still active. "Location service is on. Either they didn't check for it or she hid it deliberately." Mitchell's eyes widened slightly. "She's smart enough to know we could track her. More than that." Dominic pulled out his tablet, showing a live audio feed. She activated the voice recording app before they took her. "We've been listening to everything." Mitchell grabbed the tablet, and a man's voice came through clearly. "Told you she'd be easy to grab. Stupid girl should have minded her own business. Once Mitchell signs those papers, we don't need her anymore. Boss Donovan said we can dispose of her quietly. And Hayes won't know until it's too late, another voice added. Mr. Garrett also instructed to make it look like an accident. Mitchell's blood ran cold, but then he heard Jean's voice, small but deliberate. So Garrett Hayes and Vincent Donovan ordered my kidnapping? To force Mitchell Hayes to sign the merger documents? You're a quick one, aren't you? One of the kidnappers laughed. Yeah, Garrett's paying us $50,000 to grab you, hold you until the signing's done, then make you disappear. Said his half-brother's too soft to let anything happen to his little girlfriend. And Vincent Donovan approved this plan? Jean's voice was shaky but purposeful, getting them to confirm details. Lady, Donovan planned half of it, now shut up. Mitchell looked at Dominic, hope and terror warring in his chest. She's getting them to confess, on record. Smart woman, Dominic said. That recording is admissible evidence. We've got Garrett and Donovan on conspiracy to commit kidnapping, attempted murder, and corporate fraud. Smart and stupid, Mitchell hissed, knowing she is in immediate danger if discovered. Please be safe till I get to you, he whispered almost like a prayer. The elevator doors opened on B3. Mitchell handed back the tablet. Send that recording to the FBI and state police. Now, I want arrest warrants ready before I get her out of there. Already done, boss. Units are standing by outside the building. Good. Mitchell's voice dropped to something deadly. Because I'm about to make Garrett wish he'd never been born. They moved through the concrete maze of the parking garage, following the tracker signal. Mitchell could hear voices ahead, rough, male, threatening, and then Jean's voice, stronger now, defiant. No, you're going to have to shoot me right here, right now, because I'm not getting in that car willingly. Mitchell's heart seized. That was his jaunt, terrified but refusing to make it easy for them. He signaled Dominic to hold position and stepped out from behind the concrete pillar. The scene that greeted him made his heart stop. Jean, his beautiful, brave Jean, with her hands zip-tied behind her back so tightly that the plastic had cut into her delicate wrists. He could see blood, her blood, seeping from where the ties had bitten into her smooth, olive-brown skin. The sight of those red marks of her blood nearly brought him to his knees. But he kept his face cold, his voice steady, even as something inside him shattered at the sight of her hurt. They started to physically lift her toward the car, and Jean opened her mouth to scream. Let her go. The voice cut through the garage like a blade, cold and deadly and absolutely furious. Mitchell Hayes stepped out from behind a support column, and Jean had never seen him look dangerous before, but he looked dangerous now. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his gray eyes burning with controlled rage. And he wasn't alone. Dominic Reeves and 2 other security guards flanked him, forming a wall between Jean and the SUV. The tall man spun Jean around, using her as a shield, the gun now pressed against her temple. Stay back, Hayes, I swear to God, I'll shoot her. No, you won't. Mitchell's voice was eerily calm. Because if you hurt her, if you so much as bruise her, I will dedicate every resource of my considerable fortune to making sure you spend the rest of your life in a maximum security federal prison. I will hire the best lawyers, the best investigators, the best prosecutors. I will make it my personal mission to destroy you. He took a step forward. But if you let her go right now, you walk away. I won't press charges. I won't pursue you. You'll be free men. Bullshit, the shorter man spat. You expect us to believe... I expect you to believe that Jean Morrison's life is worth more to me than revenge? Mitchell's eyes found Jean's across the distance, and what she saw there made her heart stop. So much more. She's worth everything. The confession hung in the air, raw and honest. Jean felt tears prick her eyes because Mitchell Hayes, brilliant, powerful, controlled Mitchell Hayes, was offering to let criminals walk away free just to keep her safe. Mitchell, don't, Jean started to say. Shut up, the tall man hissed, but his grip had loosened slightly, uncertainty creeping into his voice. You really mean that? We let her go? We just walk? You have my word. Your word doesn't mean shit if you're lying. I'm not lying. Mitchell took another step forward, hands raised, completely vulnerable. Look at me. Really look. Do I look like a man who's bluffing about the woman he loves? Loves. The word hit Jean like lightning. Mitchell had just said he loved her, out loud. In front of witnesses, while she was being held at gunpoint, the 2 men exchanged glances again, clearly wavering. The tall one's gun hand was shaking now, not with threat but with indecision. How do we know you won't have your security team grab us the second we let her go? Because I'm going to tell them to stand down right now. Mitchell turned to Dominic. Dom, take your men and leave the garage, all of you now. Boss, that's insane. Now, Dominic, that's an order. Dominic looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Mitchell's face stopped him. You better know what you're doing, he muttered, then gestured to his team. Fall back, all of you. Stairs and elevator exits. Let's move. They withdrew, leaving Mitchell alone and unarmed, facing two men with guns and Jean as their hostage. There, Mitchell said once they were gone. No security team, no backup, just me. Now let her go. How do we know this isn't a trap? You don't. Mitchell's voice dropped lower, more intense. You have to trust that I'm telling you the truth because you have my woman. That I care more about her safety than catching you. That I'm willing to let you walk away free if it means she doesn't get hurt. The tall man's resolve was crumbling. John could feel it in the way his grip on her arm had loosened, the way the gun was no longer pressed quite so hard against her head. Let her go, Mitchell said again, softer this time, almost pleading. Please. Just let her go. For a long moment, nobody moved. The garage was silent except for Jean's rapid breathing and the distant sound of traffic above. Then the tall man made his decision. He shoved Jean forward, hard, and she stumbled on her bound hands, unable to catch herself. Mitchell was there in an instant, catching her before she hit the concrete, his arms wrapping around her protectively as the two men scrambled into their SUV. The engine roared to life, tires squealing as they peeled out of the garage. Mitchell didn't even look at them. His entire focus was on Jean, his hands frantically checking her for injuries while he carefully maneuvered her to a sitting position against a support column. His hands immediately went to the zip ties, and when he saw them up close, saw how deeply they'd cut into her skin, saw the blood on her wrists, saw the raw red marks that would scar, something broke inside him. Jean, he breathed, carefully cutting the ties with Dominic's knife, his hands trembling with a mixture of relief and rage. Your wrists! I'm okay, she whispered, but he could feel her shaking. You're bleeding. His voice cracked on the word. The moment the ties fell away, he cradled her wrists in his hands, seeing the damage, feeling physically ill. They hurt you, Mitchell, I'm okay. You got here in time. He pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other carefully supporting her back, mindful of her injured wrists. When I saw that note, when I realized they had you, his voice broke completely. I've never been so terrified in my life. She wrapped her freed arms around his neck despite the pain, and he felt her tears soaking into his shirt. You came for me. You gave up everything to save me. Not everything. Mitchell pulled back just enough to look at her face, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. I gave up revenge. I gave up justice. That's not everything, Jean. That's just business. He leaned his forehead against hers. You're everything, he whispered. Don't you understand that yet? You're everything, and nothing else matters. Mitchell, I love you. The words came out raw, unfiltered. I'm completely, desperately, terrifyingly in love with you, Jean Morrison. I have been since you walked into that quarterly meeting 8 months ago, and when I thought I might lose you. You love me, Jean repeated, her amber brown eyes searching his face. She had thought he was saying that just to make her kidnappers believe his words, even though she desperately wanted it to be true. Desperately, Mitchell confirmed. Then his expression shifted, and she saw a flash of something else in his storm gray eyes, worry mixed with frustration. But Jean, what you did was incredibly dangerous. Recording them trying to get evidence. What if they'd found your phone? What if they'd hurt you worse? But they didn't, Jean said softly. And now you have everything you need to put them away. I don't care about putting them away. Mitchell's voice rose slightly before he controlled it, pulling her close again. I care about you being safe. Jean, you could have been killed. When I saw those zip ties cutting into your wrists, saw your blood. His voice broke again. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I'm sorry, Jean whispered against his chest. I just wanted to help, wanted to make sure they couldn't get away with it. Mitchell pressed a kiss to the top of her head, his arms tightening around her. You're brilliant and brave and absolutely reckless with your own safety. His voice was thick with emotion. Don't ever do that again. Please, I can't watch you put yourself in danger like that. Okay, Jean promised, hearing the genuine fear beneath his words. I mean it, Jean. No more investigating dangerous criminals. No more gathering evidence without backup. No more. He pulled back to look at her seriously, his hands gentle on her face despite the intensity of his words. You're too important to me. Your safety matters more than any case, any revenge, any justice. Do you understand? Jean nodded, seeing the genuine terror in his eyes, understanding that his reprimand came from a place of devastating love. I understand. I promise. Good. Mitchell kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then finally her lips, gentle, reverent, full of relief and love and residual fear. Dominic cleared his throat from a respectful distance. Boss, FBI is here. They've arrested Donovan in the conference hall. They're looking for Garrett now. He's probably still on stage thinking he won, Mitchell said, not taking his eyes off Jean. Let them take him. I have everything I need right here. There's one more thing, Dominic added. That recording Jean made? It's gold. Garrett and Donovan both incriminating themselves, admitting to kidnapping, conspiracy, attempted murder. The DA says it's the cleanest case they've seen in years. Mitchell looked down at Jean with a mixture of pride, exasperation, and overwhelming love. You got them to confess everything. I figured if I was already in danger, I might as well make it count, Jean said with a small, brave smile. Brilliant and reckless, Mitchell repeated, shaking his head. But his eyes were soft, full of wonder. What am I going to do with you? Love me? John suggested quietly. Already doing that, Mitchell said, pulling her close again. Have been for 8 months. Will be for the rest of my life. He held her there in the parking garage while police sirens wailed above them, while Garrett was being arrested on stage, while Donovan was being read his rights in the conference hall. None of it mattered. All that mattered was John was safe in his arms, and she loved him back. I'm taking you home. My home. You're not going back to your apartment until I'm certain it's safe. Mitchell locked into her eyes subtly. Mitchell, I have work tomorrow. You're taking the rest of the week off. Medical leave. You just survived a traumatic experience. His voice softened. Please, Jean, let me take care of you. Let me keep you safe. Just for a few days until we know everyone involved in this scheme is in custody. Jean looked up at him, at this strong, protective man who was asking, not ordering. Even though she could see how much he wanted to just sweep her up and take her somewhere secure, and felt her heart melt completely. Okay, she agreed. But you're staying with me. No disappearing to the office for emergency meetings or damage control. If I'm taking time off, you're taking time off. Mitchell's smile was soft and genuine. Deal, though I should warn you, I'm terrible at relaxing. We'll learn together. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than desperation. Then he carefully guided her toward his car, one arm around her waist, like he couldn't bear not to be touching her. As they drove out of the garage into afternoon sunlight, Jean looked back at Hayes Global Industries disappearing behind them, and realized something profound. She'd come to that building this morning thinking she was saving Mitchell Hayes' company. But what she'd actually done was save herself, from a life of playing it safe, of staying invisible, of never taking risks for something that mattered. And Mitchell, he'd spent 3 years building walls to protect himself from caring. But Jean had demolished those walls with a folded note and genuine courage, showing him that love wasn't a liability. It was the only thing worth fighting for. What are you thinking about? Mitchell asked, glancing at her as he navigated traffic. That this morning, when I slipped you that note, I had no idea it would lead to this. To me, confessing my love while you were being held hostage? Jean laughed. That was definitely not in my planning. But yes, to this, to us. Mitchell reached over and took her hand, intertwining their fingers. Best dizzy spell anyone's ever staged. Best kidnapping rescue ever executed. Too soon for kidnapping jokes, Jean? Too soon for love confessions in parking garages? Mitchell squeezed her hand. Never too soon for truth. And driving through Boston's afternoon traffic, hands intertwined, Jean realized that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was trust a powerful man with your heart. But sometimes, if you were very lucky, that powerful man would prove he'd trusted you with his first. And that made all the difference. 3 months later, Jean stood in Mitchell's office, their office now technically, since she'd been promoted to VP of Financial Operations and given a space right next door, reviewing quarterly projections. The evening sun cast long shadows across the Boston skyline, painting the buildings gold. It had been 3 months since the signing ceremony that never happened. 3 months since Mitchell had walked away from his perfect moment of revenge to save her. 3 months since everything had changed. Garrett Hayes and Vincent Donovan were both in federal custody, awaiting trial on multiple counts of corporate fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The evidence Mitchell and Jean had gathered was airtight. Garrett had tried to leverage his relationship with Mitchell, had begged for mercy, had claimed family should mean something. Mitchell had looked at his half-brother with cold eyes and said simply, "Family means protecting people you love, not threatening them. You made your choice, Garrett. Now live with it." The 2 men who'd kidnapped Jean had been identified, low-level criminals hired by Garrett to intimidate her. True to his word, Mitchell hadn't pressed charges against them, but he'd submitted a detailed report to the FBI about Garrett's actions, and those men were now cooperating witnesses in exchange for immunity. Karma, Jean thought, had a beautiful sense of irony. Hayes Global Industries had emerged from the scandal stronger than ever. The board had restructured leadership, promoted from within, and implemented new oversight protocols to prevent future fraud. Mitchell's reputation as a CEO had only grown. He'd turned down the opportunity for public revenge in favor of quiet justice. And the business world respected that. But the biggest changes had been personal. Mitchell had been right that he was terrible at relaxing. The first week after the kidnapping, he'd been impossible, checking security feeds obsessively, calling Jean every hour when she went anywhere alone, barely sleeping because he kept waking up to make sure she was still there, still safe, still real. It had taken Jean sitting him down and very firmly explaining that he couldn't live in constant fear, that she was safe now, that he needed to trust his own security protocols. "I almost lost you," Mitchell had said, and the raw vulnerability in his voice had broken Jean's heart. "But you didn't. I'm here. I'm staying. You need to believe that." It had gotten better after that. Mitchell had slowly relaxed, though he still insisted on personally reviewing all building security at least once a week. Jean had learned to recognize when he was spiraling into protective worry and knew exactly how to bring him back. A touch on his arm, a soft, "I'm right here," a kiss that reminded him she was safe and present in his. They'd made their relationship public after the first month. Not with a big announcement, just by showing up to company events together, by Jean's promotion being accompanied by full disclosure to HR and the board, by Mitchell introducing her as my partner at industry functions. There had been gossip, of course, whispers about the age difference, speculation about favoritism, raised eyebrows at the speed of Jean's promotion. But the gossip had died quickly when Jean's quarterly reports proved she'd earned her position through brilliance and hard work. And anyone who looked at Mitchell and Jean together could see this wasn't some CEO playing with a young employee. This was 2 people completely, genuinely in love. "Hey." Mitchell's voice pulled Jean from her thoughts. He stood in the doorway connecting their offices, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking tired but content. "You almost done? We have dinner reservations in an hour." "Almost. Just finishing the final review of the Emerson acquisition projections." Mitchell crossed to her desk, leaned against it. "You know, you don't have to work until 7 every night." "That's not a requirement of being VP," says the man who was in a board meeting until 6:30. "Fair point," Mitchell smiled, then reached out and gently closed Jean's laptop. "But I'm learning that sometimes the most important thing is knowing when to stop working and start living." Jean looked up at him, this incredible man who'd learned to let someone past his walls, who'd chosen love over revenge, who looked at her like she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. "Who taught you that?" she asked softly. "A brilliant financial analyst who staged a dizzy spell to slip me a warning note." Mitchell pulled her to her feet, into his arms. "She's been teaching me a lot of things. Like how to trust someone completely, like how love isn't a liability, it's strength. Like how the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be vulnerable with someone who sees your worth." Jean wrapped her arms around his neck. "She sounds wise. She's extraordinary." Mitchell's voice dropped lower, more serious. "Jean, there's actually something I wanted to talk to you about." "Okay. I know we've only been together officially for 3 months. I know by conventional standards that's fast. But I also know that I've been in love with you for 8 months before that. I know that you're the first person I think about when I wake up and the last person I want to see before I sleep. I know that when I imagine my future, you're in every single picture." Jean's heart started racing. Mitchell, wait, let me finish before I lose my nerve. He stepped back slightly, and Jean watched in shock as Mitchell Hayes, powerful CEO, self-made billionaire, man who commanded boardrooms with a look, dropped to one knee in front of her. Oh my God, Jean breathed. Jean Morrison, you saved my company. But more importantly, you saved me from a life of being alone, of thinking that walls kept people safe when all they really do is keep people lonely. You showed me that love is worth the risk, that being vulnerable is a kind of courage, that the right person makes everything, all the danger, all the fear, all the uncertainty, worth it. Mitchell pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Jean's vision blurred with tears. I'm not promising you a safe life. My world is complicated and sometimes dangerous, and there will always be people who see you as leverage. But I'm promising you that I will spend every single day of the rest of my life protecting you, cherishing you, partnering with you in everything. I'm promising you that you'll never face anything alone again, that we'll build something together that's stronger than any threat, any enemy, any obstacle. He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and unique, so perfectly Jean that she gasped. Marry me, Jean, not because it's been long enough or because it's the logical next step. Marry me because 3 months ago, you walked away from those men, and I realized I couldn't imagine a future without you in it. Marry me because when I held you in that parking garage, I knew with absolute certainty that you're the person I want beside me for every challenge, every triumph, every ordinary Tuesday morning for the rest of my life. His voice broke slightly. Marry me because I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. Because you're my partner, my equal, my everything. Because that note you slipped into my hand changed my entire world, and I want to spend forever showing you how grateful I am that you were brave enough to trust me with the truth. Tears were streaming down Jean's face now, and she didn't even try to stop them. Mitchell Hayes, controlled, composed Mitchell Hayes, was on his knees in front of her, his gray eyes shining with emotion, his hands trembling slightly as he held that ring, looking up at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. Yes, Jean said, her voice breaking. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Mitchell's face transformed with joy. He stood quickly, sliding the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, of course, because Mitchell Hayes paid attention to details. Probably had noticed her ring size months ago through some small observation. Then he was kissing her, deep and sweet and full of promise, his arms wrapped around her like he'd never let go. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Mitchell rested his forehead against hers. I was so nervous, he admitted. What if you said it was too soon? What if you wanted to wait? Mitchell, you gave up revenge for me. You let criminals walk away to keep me safe. You confessed your love while I had a gun to my head. Jean laughed through her tears. I think we're past conventional relationship timelines. Fair point. Mitchell kissed her again, softer this time. Though for the record, I've been carrying that ring for 6 weeks. I've proposed to you in my head about 50 times. Tonight just felt right. It is right. Everything about this is right. Jean looked down at the ring, watching it catch the evening light. It's beautiful, Mitchell. The sapphire, the color of your dress, the burgundy dress you wore the day you gave me the note. Mitchell's thumb traced her cheekbone. I wanted you to have something that reminded you of that morning. The morning you were brave enough to trust me, to risk everything to save me. The morning that changed both our lives. Jean's chest ached with love for this thoughtful, romantic man who hid his softness behind boardroom authority, but showed it to her. In moments like this. When? She asked. When do you want to get married? Tomorrow. Mitchell said it immediately, then laughed at her expression. I'm joking, mostly. But Jean, I don't want a long engagement. I don't want to wait years planning some elaborate society wedding. I want to marry you soon. Small ceremony, just people we love, focused on us rather than showing off for business contacts. That sounds perfect. Jean smiled. Though I should warn you, my grandmother is going to want to invite half of Brooklyn, and she's going to cry through the entire ceremony. I can't wait to meet her properly, to tell her that her granddaughter saved my life in every way that matters. Mitchell pulled Jean close again, swaying slightly like they were dancing to music only they could hear. 6 months? Is 6 months too soon? 6 months is perfect. They stood there in Mitchell's office, holding each other as the sun set over Boston, engaged and in love and building a future together that neither of them had dared hope for 3 months ago. "I have a question," Jean said after a comfortable silence. "Anything." "That morning, when I gave you the note, had you really been watching me? For 8 months?" Mitchell had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Yes. Not in a creepy way, I hope. I just couldn't help noticing you, couldn't stop thinking about you, couldn't resist finding excuses to be near you, even though I told myself I was keeping my distance. The coffee deliveries? Me. The improved benefits package? Also me. The security protocols that just happened to cover my floor more thoroughly? Definitely me." Mitchell sighed. "I was trying to protect you from a distance. Trying to care for you without getting close enough to make you a target. Obviously, that didn't work out as planned. Because I made myself a target by warning you about Donovan. Because you were brave enough to step into my world." Mitchell corrected gently. "And thank God you did, because I was miserable, Jean. Lonely and miserable and convinced I was doing the right thing by staying alone. You showed me I was just existing, not living." Jean kissed him softly. "Well, now we get to live together. For the rest of our lives." "The rest of our lives," Mitchell repeated like he was testing the words, tasting their promise. "I like the sound of that." "Me too." Mitchell pulled Jean toward the window, both of them looking out over the city that had witnessed their entire story. The fraud, the kidnapping, the rescue, the love that had grown despite every obstacle. "No regrets?" Mitchell asked softly. "About any of it? The danger, the complications, the fact that loving me means living with security protocols and corporate enemies?" "Not one regret." Jean turned in his arms to face him. "Mitchell, you're worth every complication, every security check, every protocol, every moment of worry. You're worth all of it because you're you. The man who chose me over revenge, who protected me without asking for anything in return, who showed me what real love looks like. And what does real love look like? Like a powerful CEO on his knees, promising forever to a junior analyst who staged a dizzy spell." Jean smiled. "Like choosing someone over everything else, like being brave enough to be vulnerable." Mitchell kissed her forehead, her cheeks the tip of her nose before finally capturing her lips in a kiss that tasted like promise and future, and forever. Did Mitchell and Jean's story remind you that love is worth every risk? That sometimes the bravest thing we can do is trust someone with the truth and trust them with our hearts? If this story touched you, if you felt every emotion, every fear, every moment of desperate love, then subscribe, share, and turn on notifications. Because stories like this, stories about courage, sacrifice, and love that conquers everything, they need readers who believe in them. Also consider buying me a coffee, because your support, whether it's $1 or $50, tells me these stories matter. That emotional journeys like Mitchell and Jean's are worth the hours of crafting every confession, every protective moment, and every desperate choice. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being part of Mitchell and Jean's journey from a folded note to forever.